ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11th, Chapter 14th, chapter entitled Lord Krishna Explains the Yoga System. Text 8. एवं प्रकृति वैचित्र्याद् विद्यन्ते मतयो नृणाम् पारम्पर्येण केषाञ्चे पाषण्डमतयो परे। एवं प्रकृतिवैचित्र्यात् विद्यन्ते मतयो नृणाम् पारम्पर्येण केषाञ्चित् पाषण्डमतयो परे। एवं प्रकृतिवैचित्र्यात् विद्यन्ते मतयो नृणाम् पारम्पर्येण केषाञ्चित् पाषण्डमतयो अपरे। एवं प्रकृतिवैचित्र्यात् विद्यन्ते मतयो नृणाम् पारम्पर्येण केषाञ्चित् पाषण्डमतयो परे। पाषण्डमतयो परे. Mataji's. Word to word meaning, translation and purport by His Divine the disciples of His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Evam, thus, Prakriti of nature or desires, Vaichitryat, due to the great variety, Vidyante are divided, Matayaha, philosophies of life, Nrunam, among human beings, Paramparyena, by tradition or disciplic succession, Keshanchit, among some people, Pashanda, atheistic, Matayaha, philosophies, Apare, others. Translation. Thus, due to the great variety of desires and natures among human beings, there are many different theistic philosophies of life which are handed down through tradition, custom, and disciplic succession. There are other teachers who directly support atheistic viewpoints. Purport. The word Keshanchit refers to those persons in various parts of the world who are ignorant of the Vedic conclusion and thus concoct many unauthorized and ultimately fruitless philosophies of life. Pashanda Matayaha refers to those who directly oppose the Vedic conclusions. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given a most interesting example as follows. The water of the Ganges is always pure and very sweet. On the banks of that great river, however, there are several types of poisonous trees whose roots drink up the Ganges water from the soil and use it to produce poisonous fruits. Similarly, those who are atheistic or demoniac utilize their association with Vedic knowledge to produce the poisonous fruits of atheistic or materialistic philosophy. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरौ श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So we are discussing from 11th canto, this 14th chapter. Lord Krishna explains the yoga system. In this first 12 verses, talk about pure devotional service is supreme among all the processes. That will come little later because we are at the 8th verse. 5th to 7th, these verses, they talk about cause for different processes. And what is the cause? Because there are different modes, Sattvagun, Rajagun and Tamagun, goodness, passion and ignorance. And that's why there are different opinions that arise. This particular today's verse, 8th verse, talks about many processes, and that is result of variety. All systems come in parampara. So there are many different types of human beings. Each one has his own philosophy. But they originate from original some few philosophies, and then it goes because so many different combinations as the modes themselves. It's like 3 colors you take and you mix them in different proportions, and so many different varieties of colors are made. Likewise, 3 modes by their different combination in different proportions give rise to so many different mentalities of different human beings, and that's how then there are so many philosophies. But originally there have been acharyas who have given pure philosophies in theistic system, and there are atheistic systems also. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says there are ignorant heretical teachings handed down in Guru tradition. So ignorant heretical teachings are also there. That we'll discuss in the process. And they are contrary to the Vedas. Because Vedas don't talk about in that sense. Those kind of pure Vedas don't talk about that. Since they are completely material, and he gives this nice example which proper disciples have cited over here. Ganges water is very pure and very sweet also, but when received by the roots of bitter or poisonous trees growing on its bank, it becomes distasteful sap in the trees. Similarly, when the Vedas they come from the mouths of these faithless people, the meaning becomes distasteful and gives results which are opposite to the normal results. So it will be a little maybe philosophical. We'll try to simplify. But the section itself is about Gyan, about knowledge. Very surprisingly, both Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, they in one sense they are same. So both have Karma Yoga in the beginning, Bhakti Yoga in the middle, and eventually Gyan Yoga. So Gyan Yoga is, now we know Bhakti is supreme. So why Gyan Yoga should come at the end? Because there is protection required for Bhakti. Just like we find in the case of Bharat Maharaj, he had such great devotion for the Lord. It is said that he entered in the preliminary stage of Bhava Bhakti, and there were tears from his eyes. So many symptoms were coming in his body. But then unfortunately, he got attached to one deer. Knowledge, Bhakti gives rise to knowledge and Vairagya, but it also requires this kind of knowledge which has to protect that bhakti, else one can get carried away even from the path of bhakti also. That's why the knowledge is there to support. It's like very valuable thing, just like we have these diamonds or gold jewelry, we put them in that velvet color thing, velvet thing, nice casing, so that it should be nicely protected. So Gyan also does that job of protecting the bhakti very nicely within. So that's what is being described over here. And in today's verse in particular, there is discussion about theistic and atheistic philosophies. So if you see, first of all, the atheistic philosophies also, theist means what? A theistic philosophy, that God does exist. Belief in the existence of God is theism, and no belief in the existence of God is atheism. They don't believe. But without God's presence, the atheism cannot be discussed only. Because God exists, so that's how then people on the other side who don't want to surrender to God, who have been against Him for many lifetimes, they have to come up with so many theories, so many different ways, proofs, so to say, evidences to disprove, or in a sense to prove that God doesn't exist. So they have so many philosophies, have so many discussions on that also, on the atheistic side. But there are more theistic proposals and philosophies than atheistic. And there are so many nice ways Prabhupada in all throughout his books explains to them very nicely to us. So we'll discuss a little, we have been discussing a little bit in a general way. Then we'll discuss about the Shad-darshan, 6 schools of philosophies. How many of you have heard 6 schools of philosophy? May I ask for raising of hands? And how many of you are very clear about it? Okay. So this is very important. In fact, I was also not very clear. But it is said the one who sits on Vyasasana, his qualification is he has to be very thorough in these 6 philosophies. I regret that for 21 years or more, I did not know them so properly, or rather did not know them almost anything to any extent. But recently I came across something and we'll discuss that a little elaborately. So these Shad-darshans, whether they are theistic or atheistic, many times there is misunderstanding that they are all atheistic. So Prabhupada very nicely explains. So we would like to discuss that, and then eventually we'll see some of the really atheistic philosophies. This is based on His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj book, which he wrote recently, Ocean of Mercy. So there this discussion comes, and this is very important because many of you may be giving classes, and I am also giving, at least for my sake. I need to repeat this, and these are very important. So it so happened that Bhakti Charu Maharaj was very pleased with His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, several times asking so many questions to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada getting in ecstasy and answering them very nicely. So he appreciated Tamal Krishna Maharaj, that Maharaj, you are so great, you ask so many questions, you are very intelligent Maharaj, you ask so many intelligent questions. So then Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, it's not a matter of such intelligence, basically it's a matter of sincere desire to know something. When one has a sincere question, one can ask. So His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj shared that how once in Mayapur, he had asked Srila Prabhupada that the condition of India would have been better if Mahatma Gandhi had become a devotee of Krishna. So this greatly annoyed Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said then in Bengali, because both were from Bengali background, Prabhupada said, if only I had a wife, then I would have had a son. So you don't have only wife, so why do you discuss about son? It's useless. So the one who did not become a devotee only, he did not take it up. Prabhupada tried so many times, we know, even before going to West, but it did not come out in a proper way. So Prabhupada was annoyed at that kind of question. So that's why Bhakti Charu Maharaj was kind of refraining from asking a question. So then Tamal Krishna Maharaj guided him, said that no, you ask a sincere question. You want to know something, you can ask a question, and that is art of asking questions. Just like that, one should not ask any random question. It should be really a sincere question in the heart. So then at different times, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, as he was the servant of Srila Prabhupada, in particular in Rishikesh from 5th to 15th of May 1977. One of the last um, proposals was maybe Prabhupada could be in Rishikesh, and there, because of the nice serene atmosphere, he might get recovery in his health. So they had gone there, but it did not work out so well, and Prabhupada got indication that he should leave body in Vrindavan. So that's what he revealed to Bhakti Charu Maharaj, who eventually informed Tamakashna Maharaj, and they quickly came back via Delhi to Vrindavan. So while being there, so Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj had seen Prabhupada talking to many devotees about the Shaddarshan, 6 schools of philosophy. So he had a question about it, but being feeling little shy or so, he did not ask in the daytime in front of devotees. But in the night when he was there alone with Prabhupada in his room, then he remembered that Tamal Krishna Maharaj advice, and he thought this is best time. So he asked Prabhupada this question, that he gathered courage and he said, Srila Prabhupada, in your books, you mentioned that 5 of the 6 branches of Shaddarshan are considered atheistic. And at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Narad Muni points out to Srila Vyasdev that even the 6th branch, Vedanta, is tinged with impersonalism. So that also falls short of perfection. Why then is it necessary to study them, and how is that knowledge going to benefit us? Is it in order to defeat the proponents of the other doctrines? So this is his question. So are all 6 atheistic, 5 purely atheistic, and 6th also has impersonal tints, so that's why that also is more or less impersonalistic, or that is also useless or atheistic. So now Prabhupada's answer here, this is in 77, so it's very nice. Srila Prabhupada seemed pleased with my question, with Maharaj's question. No, he explained, our main business is not to defeat others, but to establish the fact that devotion to Krishna consciousness is the ultimate spiritual goal. This material nature is the perverted reflection of the spiritual reality. We have to understand that whatever is here in this world has its origin in the spiritual world. When in the reflection of a tree, we see the green leaves, red flowers, and yellow fruits, we have to understand that they must be there in the real tree. Otherwise, how can they be in the reflection? Everything is coming from the spiritual sky. Whatever is here in this material world is also existing in the spiritual reality. So Prabhupada is making 2 things clear here by after saying no, that we are not interested in defeating these atheistic people, philosophies, but our main business is to establish devotion to Krishna consciousness. So this is very important. That we will see later also. So then he said, the perfect perception is to see things in that light. The Vedas have been designed to reveal the identity of Krishna and bring the living entities to his lotus feet. The 6 branches of Vedic philosophy are actually 6 steps of gradual elevation to understanding the ultimate goal, devotion to Krishna. So Prabhupada is saying they are not atheistic. There are 6 steps towards the goal, that is devotion to Krishna. So how that he elaborately explains that. I am reading as it is because that is very authentic, and little bit maybe we will explain, little philosophical. As such, we have heard this several lectures here and there in bits and pieces, but everything put together by Srila Prabhupada in his own words. So I feel it very nice, and it's very helpful to know everything very clearly. So first he states the 6 philosophies. These 6 branches are Purva Mimamsa, in English preliminary conclusions, or Karma Mimamsa. This is first, Purva Mimamsa. Second is Nyaya in Sanskrit, and in English logic. Third is Vaisheshika, that is atomic theory. Then 4th is Sankhya, that is analytical studies. 5th is Yoga, linking with the Supreme Lord, as Patanjali has given. And 6th is Uttar Mimamsa, that is final conclusions given by Vyasdev, and also called as Vedanta. So all these are 6 stated here by Prabhupada and then explained kind of in brief. Prabhupada says if you simply regard them as independent branches of philosophy and study them without their relation to Krishna, they appear to be atheistic. Because of kind of 2 reasons they appear atheistic. One thing, if you independently study them as some branch of philosophy, without coming in parampara, without having heard properly, and study them without their relation to Krishna. Because in parampara only that link with Krishna is there. The whole thing is in connection with Krishna. But because one doesn't study in parampara, just independently he gets some books here and there and tries to study and come to a conclusion, the conclusion would be atheistic. These 6 branches are like rungs on a ladder. The rungs of the ladder by themselves cannot be the real goal. Their actual utility is in relation to the ladder, and the purpose of the ladder is to reach the ultimate height, that is devotional service to Krishna. So there are different rungs. So the goal is not to be on one of the rungs. The goal is to reach that thing for which, to reach somewhere for which we have used this particular ladder. So now Prabhupada explains. The Vedas impart 3 levels of understanding: Karma Kand, Jnana Kand, and Bhakti. Initially, one in this material nature wants to enjoy through sense gratification, and the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas gives directions on how to enjoy. As you act accordingly, you will get the result. Right action leads to enjoyment and wrong action to suffering. This is called the law of karma, the principle of action and reaction. Therefore, one must know how to act in order to really enjoy, which can lead one to the highest region of material universe, Satyalok, where Lord Brahma is situated. So he is saying Karma Kand is the first one. That is Purva Mimamsa. Which in English is called as preliminary conclusions or Karma Mimamsa. So this is Karma Mimamsa. Then this is Karma Kand. Then next 4 are Jnana Kand. And the last Vedanta leads to Bhakti. That's how Prabhupada explains. However, in spite of all endeavors for enjoyment, one eventually realizes that he cannot avoid suffering. This requires many lifetimes of enjoyment. One tries here, there, go this hotel, go to that motel, and go to this city, and go to this country, and try here, there, all kind of sense gratification. You try, then it will take long time. One will understand this doesn't give happiness. There is a problem there, some problem. So that will force him to be thoughtful. He'll keep thinking, what's the problem? Where is the problem? And he will keep thinking, and that will make him more serious. Then he will enter in the Gyan Kanda section. So he understands then that one eventually realizes that he cannot avoid suffering. Uninterrupted enjoyment is not possible in this material nature. Suffering comes on its own and is unavoidable. And Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam, that we know from Parampara. But without that only, without coming in Parampara, one will come to this conclusion eventually after enjoying a lot, trying to enjoy basically, that he will understand there is no happiness here. Something else is the way. Suffering comes of his own and is unavoidable. That is his conclusion. When a person begins to wonder why is he suffering and tries to find the way out of it, he comes to the Jnanakand platform. And through 4 branches of Vedic philosophy, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya and Yoga, he gradually transcends the material world and establishes his connection to the Lord in the heart. So he not trying for material enjoyment. Now he is getting in the realm of knowledge. Through Nyaya, he comes to understand that this material nature is place of suffering, Dukkhalayam, and that the material body is a perfect instrument for receiving pain. Shariram, Vyadhi Mandiram. So many diseases. Every day you get up and you find some problem in the body. That is how this body is designed. Idam Shariram, Parinama Peshalam, Patati Avasham Shatasandhi Jarjaram. It is made up of so many joints, hundreds of bones, and they are put very nicely, just like RCC structure. That is the main structure, and then on that there is plastering and painting and all that. That is like the skin. The plastering and painting is like the skin and all that. But the main structure is of bones. And his body is designed in such a way that one cannot be happy. So this conclusion to reach takes many lifetimes. It's not so easy. By the grace of a devotee in Parampara, one could realize it at the earliest. But without that, otherwise in a natural process, it takes long time. So he comes to understand that this is not going to work. That the material body is a perfect instrument for receiving pain. For example, just consider how many ways you can inflict pain on your little finger or any part of your body. But you will find so few ways to give it pleasure, from which we can conclude that this material body is a wonderful instrument for receiving pain. Just like our little finger. What is the best pleasure it can give? Maybe if some itching is there in the ear, we can put this. Now if I have itching in the left ear, if I try to do with my right hand, it's a very complex thing. I will have to use my left finger, this little finger. That's all. We cannot put our thumb. Thumb will not reach the inner recesses of the ears. So that is one way of our little finger giving us pleasure. But how many different ways it can give us distress? There are so many ways. It may get stuck in the door, and people get so many things. Sometimes while hammering, with the left hand, let's say, or something like that. Somebody else is hammering, you are putting it with nail you are holding, and that he hits on the little finger, and then little finger gives not little distress, it gives lot of distress, and it's very painful. And so many other things are possible, hundreds and millions of ways through which our little finger can give us distress. But the pleasure maybe this one, and maximum maybe while taking prasadam, we can use that little finger. Little bit is supporting the other four fingers. Thereafter, one begins to consider that this material nature really, what this material nature really is. And through the Vaisheshika branch of philosophy, he realizes that the perceivable material world is actually composed of the minutest particles called paramanu or atoms. So, in the Karma Kand section, Purva Mimamsa, his conclusion was sense gratification, and he tries it, he understands not possible. So, Dukhalayam, so that's what he concludes through Nyaya, that this place is filled with suffering. Now he goes little deeper in the Vaisheshika. In Vaisheshika means atomic theory. He thinks that this body and this material world is made up of minutest particles. But to our, and they are all basically particles only. They are all basically atoms only, dead in themselves. But to our senses, it takes various shapes, forms and perceptions. All these atoms put together, and then we get some form, some perception. And we think, maybe this form can give me pleasure. But in essence, what it is? The dead atoms. So that cannot give me pleasure. But the senses try to see in a particular way for enjoyment. In other words, what appears to our senses to be real is not actually real, because all made up of atoms and all small and they are all dead. Therefore, this material nature is an illusion. So this is his conclusion within Vaisheshika theory, that is atomic theory. So that is third. Then fourth, this leads to the next branch of Vedic philosophy called Sankhya, or analytical study, which describes the material nature consisting of 5 items, 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air and ether. And the individual with 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue and skin. So 5 plus 5, 10. The senses interact with the elements and 5 objects of the senses are generated. 5 more, that makes it 15. The ears interact with ether and sound is produced. The skin interacts with air and touch is produced. The eyes interact with fire and form is produced. The tongue interacts with water and taste is produced. And nose interacts with earth and smell is produced. So these interactions are required for producing that sense object. So then next, so 15 are over, now some more. There are also 5 working senses with which we become active in this world, namely the hands, legs, voice, anus and genitals. In this way, Sankhya philosophy determines 20 tattvas or aspects of material nature. So these are 5 working senses, because with that we work. With hand we can do some actual thing like that. But we could do it through our voice also. We may tell some devotee, Prabhu, could you please bring that glass of water here? So he brings it. So through your voice you acted. And similarly anus and genital also, apart from legs. Then he says that material nature then considers 3 subtle subject elements beyond that, that is the mind, intelligence and false ego. So 20 plus 3, 23. And subsequently the Mahat Tattva, the total material energy, from which the entire creation became manifest. So 24 elements. That when one reaches, that means he is in the Sankhya part. Through these 24 manifestations, Sankhya philosophy analyzes the entire material nature. However, it concludes that these 24 manifestations are objective in nature and cannot exist without the subject, the I, the self, the soul. So all these 24, what is the use without I, without the self, without the soul? The entire material nature has been analyzed, but the soul cannot be found there. Therefore, it comes from another reality, the spiritual nature, and has its origin, its source, in the Supreme Soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, Sankhya philosophy takes one to the spiritual reality and transcends the material nature. So he analyzes all the 24 elements can be analyzed without anything to do with soul. But after analyzing all, then he understands, no, the soul is not there. Naiti, not this, not this, not this, not this. All 24 over, and what is it then? If not this, not this, not this, then what it is? So that has to be found out. Then he comes to conclusion that I, the soul, has spiritual nature, and I originate from the Supreme Soul, Super Soul. So then he comes to the 5th one. Recognition of the fact that the soul is a part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead leads to the final aspect of Jnanakand called Yoga. Yoga is the process by which the spirit soul becomes connected to the Super Soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This process has 8 different stages or limbs, therefore it is called Ashtanga Yoga. So we know them. We have heard Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pratyahar, Pranayam, Dharana, Dhyanan, Samadhi. So these are the 8. Now through this he is going to link with the super soul. In that final stage, Samadhi, one perceives the super soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in one's heart. Recognizing one's minuteness and greatness of the Supreme Lord, one's head automatically bends down in respect and one surrenders to Him. So this is becoming now spiritual, more spiritual. So all the way from sense gratification, one has come so close now to one of the manifestations of the Supreme, one of the features of the Absolute Truth, that is Paramatma. He has come very close now. This surrender to the Lord is the very foundation of devotional service, bhakti, the main aspect of the final branch of Vedic philosophy, and it has been explained through the 6th branch of Vedic philosophy called Uttar Mimamsa, of the final conclusion. It is also called Vedanta. The Vedanta philosophy is based on the Vedanta Sutra, which apparently refers to the impersonal Brahman. But in his natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasdev establishes that surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and loving devotional service to Him is the actual objective of Vedanta philosophy. Thus, bhakti takes one beyond liberation to engagement in loving devotional service to the Lord. In this way, through Karmakand and Jnanakand, one is gradually elevated to the ultimate point of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the perfect understanding of the 6 branches of Vedic philosophy. So we can see from sense gratification, outright sense gratification, all the way he enters in Nyaya, he understands this is Dukkhalayam, then he gets into Vaisheshika, atomic theory, it's all atoms, then he gets into Sankhya, no there are 24 elements, but then also where is the activating principle? So that is soul who originates from super soul. So linking of the both is through yoga process, that is the 5th, and then finally he comes to bhakti through the Uttar Mimamsa, that is Vedanta Sutra, which apparently appears impersonalistic, God without a form. But Vyasdev, who is the original commentator on the Vedanta Sutra, and that's what he wrote, natural commentary, Srimad Bhagavatam, wherein he makes it so clear that Krishna, or the Supreme Lord, is a person, and bhakti to him is the ultimate goal of life. And then one will come to that conclusion. So these 6 are very important for one to understand. And sorry for speaking so philosophically, or rather repeating from there, but it is very important because in the Adi Lila of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, Siddhanta boliya chitte na kore alas, iha haite Krishna lage sudruda manas. One should not hesitate to speak the Vedanta, or for that matter, any Siddhanta, any philosophical discussion. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he spoke mostly in Dhaka, on the first verse of the first chapter of first canto, 111, Janmadi Asya Yatah, he spoke continuously for 30 days. People got bored there and said, what, Swamiji, enough. People did not get bored at the age of at the 30th day, but much before that only, and said, when are you going to reach the 10th canto, Krishna Lila? We want to hear that, especially Ras Lila. He said, I am not. You may be qualified. Prabhupada also said that. You may be qualified to hear that subject matter, but I am not. So one has to hear the hardcore philosophy in that subject, for that matter, to understand Krishna's greatness. That's why 9 cantos are describing very elaborately that. And then one sees Krishna's lotus face, that is 10th canto, and in that also the topmost is Ras Lila. So one should not directly jump in there. Else one will misunderstand the Lord, and one will think, okay, he danced with so many girls, so I should also dance with some young girls and have fun. That's what people do outside world, because they don't understand the authenticity and the purity of this Ras Lila, because they directly jump in the 10th canto. First 9 cantos have to be passed through, though it's little tedious, little laborious, but with the purports of Vyasdev through Srimad Bhagavatam, and especially Prabhupada's purports, that makes it very pure, very relishable. So this is very important, because only when one understands Siddhanta properly, Boliya chitte na kare alas, one should not be lazy in speaking and also in hearing, then only iha haite, by this, Krishna lage sudruda manas, one's mind will get stuck to Krishna very nicely, very firmly. One will not leave Krishna's lotus feet. When one understands Krishna's greatness and then proceeds to Krishna's sweetness, then it is both the aspects. Because great personalities generally are supposed to be very tough, very hard, but they are great. They will not have, they say that that kind of perfection is on the path of, it's not a bed of roses, it's on the thorny path or stones and all that. So generally those who are great, they are supposed to be, they are generally very hard, because they have gone through that hard practices. But Krishna is as great. His greatness is that he is very hard also. He has so many laws and rules. But on the other side, he has sweetness also. He's so sweet. Though nobody could be sweeter than him. Adharam Madhuram, in that song, he says, he's the sweetest of all the sweet things. Everything is sweet about him, and there is nobody sweeter than him. He's the sweetest of all sweet personality. So both sides have to be understood. Other only one is focused on, then one will become very hard-hearted. The Gyanis do that. And one other side is focused, the sweetness side, then one will be too much sentimental. And he will try to imitate Krishna in his own life, and thus get deprived of the pure devotional service. So one should not go to the either extreme. One should be in the middle and know Krishna's greatness and his sweetness, and then follow very nicely in the footsteps, in his footsteps, and also in the footsteps of the devotees who tell us how to practice these principles. So all this is very important. So through this discussion we understand that these six are not atheistic. They are theistic only. They are different rungs. If they are properly analyzed in Guru Parampara, then the conclusion is leading towards the Supreme Absolute only. But as Prabhupada made it very clear, if independently one tries to discuss them as a branch of philosophy, then he may conclude that it's atheistic. Just like we see Sri Ishopanishad also. It may look like impersonalistic description. He doesn't have hands, but he grabs everything. How is it so? He doesn't have hand, and how can he then grab everything? He doesn't have legs, but he's faster than the fastest. How is it possible? So when the Vedic description is like this, Upanishadic description is in particular, it appears very impersonalistic. Lord has not got any form. But then it talks about Lord doesn't have material form. He has spiritual form. With that he accepts the love. He doesn't have to have the material hands to grab everything material from the living entities, because he is Lakshmipati. But he basically wants to grab our devotion. So he has spiritual hands for that. He has spiritual legs. He has body is spiritual. Satchidananda Vigraha. That's what Brahmaji says in Sri Brahma Samhita. So we understand that these are not atheistic philosophies. These are theistic. Then what is atheistic philosophy? So atheistic philosophies are basically Buddhist philosophy and also Mayavad philosophy. That Prabhupada very much would condemn every now and then. That's why his Pranati Mantra also says, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. In those days, maybe earlier, it was mainly in Paschatya Desh, in the Western countries, but now it is there in all over the place. It is there in the very subtlest form. It's like loneliness is felt by every individual to some extent or the other in his heart, in his inner self. And that's how it leads to so many complications. Those who feel too much lonely and all, they go to the extremes of suicide. But others also, they behave in a very crazy way because of that loneliness. And in the association of a sadhu, sadhu has a very amazing power of absorbing all the loneliness of the person or persons who are around without getting personally affected, and their loneliness is also absorbed. Srila Prabhupada did it so wonderfully and so naturally. And that is the power of any sadhu. As much as he has the sadhutva, he has his holiness, that much easily of one or many, he absorbs their loneliness. Like Prabhupada went amongst the hippies in the Western world in 1965. They were so lonely. They were all together as hippies, all together on the streets. But actually in the heart of their hearts, they were feeling utter loneliness. So lonely they were. They could not gel with their father, their mother, their uncles, aunts, or anything, anyone and anything. And when they came together also, still, they tried so many things, LSD and smoking and all that. But in the core of their hearts, they were very lonely. And then there appears Srila Prabhupada, in the midst of them all, in the Bowery street only. And he is there walking amongst them, talking with them, and going, just like one of them, but not doing those things. But he is there, easily accessible. Any hippie can come and come to Prabhupada and said, Swamiji, I have some questions to ask you. And Prabhupada would be working on the typewriter. He would then stop it, he would keep it aside, and he would say, okay, tell me, what do you want to ask? He was so easily accessible. And then he would ask so many things. Basically, it's all revealing his loneliness. And Prabhupada, through his spiritual talks, would absorb all that loneliness and who would feel so delighted. He would feel, wow, and I have met a very great, nice, saintly person. This is so nice. Prabhupada saw each one of the hippies, and for that matter, every living entity, as a pure spirit soul, Krishna's child. Krishna's devotee. He did not see them as hippies at all. The whole world saw them as hippies, but not Prabhupada. Prabhupada saw them as devotees. That's why in the presence of Prabhupada, they felt, we are devotees. I am Krishna's devotee. Though they were going on with their externals, whatever lifestyle, the clothes and all that, but the core of their heart, they felt, I am a devotee of Krishna. Because Prabhupada saw them with that vision, so that's what they received. And that's why they left everything. They had left everything anyway. They were renunciates from the beginning only. Only it was a little distorted renunciation. When in the association of Prabhupada, they learned proper renunciation and they became very nice devotees. So Prabhupada is that great personality. And for that matter, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur also. And Prabhupada recognized that. He said, absolute sentient thou has proved, impersonal calamity thou has removed. And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was so pleased with this writing, this poem that Prabhupada wrote on his Vyas Puja Day. He said, he has understood my heart, this Abhay Charanarvind Das. And whatever he writes, just print it. Because Prabhupada understood the heart, and that we can see also. Very amazingly in his purports, he brings out that Mayavad and he smashes it. Mayavada Bhashya Sunile, Haya Sarvanash, Mayavadi, Krishna Paradi. And he would smash them every now and then through all different ways. So one should understand that this Mayavad is what is the worst, and apart from that, Buddhism. Lord Buddha's incarnation, for that matter, in NOD, Bhakti Rasamrita Srila Prabhupada clarifies, makes it very clear. He is the Supreme Lord, but his purpose is very, one specific purpose is there. Because people were into so much of killing of animals, that was a mass killing that was happening. To stop that, he came and he said, reject all these Vedas, wherein this kind of descriptions are there. You can kill a cow, you can kill this and that. So reject Vedas. So because Vedas are rejected, in which there is this philosophy about surrender to Supreme. Supreme exists and surrender to Supreme. So because Vedas are rejected, so that is atheistic. Vedana Manila Buddha. The Buddha did not accept the Vedas. Buddha is the Supreme Lord, and he said, you just surrender to me. And that was required for them. And by that people gave up all killing of the animals and they surrendered to Buddha. But then they rejected the Vedas. So then came Shankaracharya. He also spread Asat Shastra, Mayavadam, Asat Shastram, Prachannam Bodham Avyayam. So it is the Maya, this Buddhism, it is covered atheism, and impersonalism, or for that matter Mayavad, is covered Buddhism. So it is surely atheism. So that's why these two are, in particular, they are atheistic, and this is what one should be against. And those who have these two, either Mayavad or this Buddhist, they will be very envious of the Supreme Lord, not the others who are after materialism. Like once he is going through, I believe, was telling that the scientist who says the man came from monkeys, not from Supreme Lord and all that kind of stuff. But if he, because he's from India, that scientist, and he's sitting in some yagya with his wife, and he asks, the Purohit asks him, so what is the Gotra? Then he will tell Gautam or whatever that Atri, He doesn't say monkey. If he is really living by his philosophy, he should say, I come in monkey Gotra. But he doesn't say so. He says that Gautam or whatever that is. So they are apparently, because of too much of materialism, they are a little carried away, but they are not so much far away as such from it. That's why Prabhupada or many great souls say that Indians are very close to Krishna, but only thing they have turned their face away. And Westerners are very far, but they are looking towards the Supreme Lord. So this is the only difference. So one has to understand clearly. And a Madhyam Adhikari, if he is very merciful to such innocent people who are ignorant and who are covered over apparently in materialism, in sense gratification, but they are the right candidates to receive bhakti. If a Madhyam Adhikari refrains from that, then these people will go into materialism and will destroy themselves, either through suicide or through so many other means. So Madhyam Adhikari should know who are for theism and who are atheistic. That Buddhist philosophy, those people, followers of that, pure followers, and those who are for Mayavad, they will be very envious of the Lord. They will not want to hear about the Lord. But those others, if they are taught properly, they are very much eager. They can become. We were also from such background, and because somebody was merciful, some devotee, we could become devotees. So knowing that properly, one should approach them and preach them, and they can become wonderful devotees. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveta Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi.